Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Today we get to talk about one of our eastern states, Connecticut, getting something right at the Supreme Court. Let's talk more about official immunity here in just a second. Official immunity is a doctrine of case law that essentially says if you give an officer of the law the discretion to go faster than the speed limit, to run around with lights and sirens, and to arrest people to protect the public, that you have to give him immunity for the exercise of that discretion. So usually when someone exercises discretion in a manner that is inappropriate, they suffer discipline and that sort of thing from within their organization. But sometimes in the process, somebody gets hurt really bad. And when that happens, official immunity bars the lawsuit against the officer and his employer. The theory is that, he was trying to keep the public safe and you can't sue him for that. Well, almost every state has some version of official immunity, and certainly the feds do too. But the doctrine changes a little bit every month when these courts get cases to decide. Now, it's often said in the law that bad cases make bad law, and the good cases make good law, and I think this is a situation where that's the case. So, one of the things I think you probably are familiar with if you watch any YouTube at all is how popular the police chase videos are. And of course, the police chase videos are usually handed out after someone has been convicted or in some cases even before then, and they're public information. You can download them, you can watch them to your heart's content. But people put them on YouTube and they get lots of views for these chases that happen. So the reason that they're popular is because people like to see bad guys get their just desserts. But there is a problem with police chases. And the police chase problem is this. When you drive a police car, which is outfitted to go very fast, to have enough mass in it to push another car off the road, and you're going down the road, it can become a dangerous weapon in and of itself. And as to the criminal, hey, I've got no problem with that. But the general public, I have a problem with it. Now, here in just a second, we're going to look at a little bit of clip from the footage of a police chase out of Ohio. And during that police chase, they go through residential areas.
82 West approaching 42. 82 West approaching 42. Green one red light. One red light near Strongsville, City Hall. Up on 42. Looks like we'll be going. Which way we going here, guys? 82 West from 42.
And you can tell they are far exceeding the speed limit. Now, there are some times when police chases are just completely unnecessary. Somebody runs a traffic light and then they try and get away from the cops. If all you've got to cite them for is speeding and they run away, rather than chase them at speeds up around 85 miles an hour through residential areas, perhaps the brighter thing to do is to let them go, and because you have their license plate on camera, you just wait till they get home and you go there and arrest them. In fact, that was recently done, I believe it was in Philadelphia, where a young woman basically flipped off the police and ran away, and the officer didn't pursue her because she was downtown. There was a lot of traffic. It was late at night, and there was a good chance that somebody could have gotten hurt. Now, that's an officer using discretion. But countervailing that, you have the situation where you have a hostage or you have a kidnapped victim in the car. You can't let that guy go. somebody who has committed murder and is likely to commit murder again, somebody who's shot a cop. Again, these are not people who are thinking rationally, or if they are thinking rationally, they're thinking that they put their life above everybody else's. So some chases, I believe the police absolutely have to do. But that's not all of the chases that have to be done. And so let's look at the facts of this case, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how the Connecticut Supreme Court got it right. So this is from the syllabus of the Supreme Court opinion that was released yesterday by the Connecticut Supreme Court in Marlene Adescan et al. Versus the town of Bloomfield et al. So the court starts off by talking about the statute 52-557N and the common law, which give employees qualified immunity from liability for their negligent acts or omissions in the performance of duties that require the exercise of judgment or discretion, except as otherwise provided by law. So there is another statute, section 14-283. The privileges afforded to an operator of an emergency vehicle, which include the right to disregard certain traffic laws, signals, and signs under certain conditions, shall not relieve the operator of the emergency vehicle from the duty to drive with due regard for the safety of all persons and property. The plaintiff, individually and on behalf of her two children, sought to recover damages from the defendants, the town of Bloomfield, its police department, and one of its police officers, Jay, in connection with injuries the plaintiff and her children sustained when the vehicle in which they were traveling was struck by the police cruiser. At the time of the collision, Jay was responding to a report of a possible abduction and traveling in the southbound lane of traffic several vehicles behind the plaintiff's vehicle. The plaintiff arrived at the intersection and made a left-hand turn. But Jay, while traveling at a speed exceeding 70 miles per hour, moved into the northbound lane, attempted to pass, and collided with plaintiff's vehicle. So you can get a better idea of how this happened. There was traffic blocking the southbound lanes, so when the lady turned left, as you can see here, the police officer was already in the passing lane, accelerating forward at 70 miles per hour, and of course this was the result. The trial court granted the defendant's motion for summary judgment and rendered judgment for the defendants, concluding that the police officer's operation of the vehicle constituted a discretionary act that was subject to governmental immunity. And they relied on a case called Borelli versus Rinaldi, in which the court concluded that the duty to drive with due regard imposed a discretionary duty to act with respect to a police officer's decision to initiate and continue a pursuit of a fleeing motorist. On appeal, the plaintiff claimed, among other things, that the trial court improperly had relied on Borelli and incorrectly concluded that discretionary act immunity barred her claims. So here's what the Supreme Court says. The trial court improperly granted the defendant's motion, as the defendants were not entitled to discretionary act immunity because such immunity does not apply to the manner in which an emergency vehicle is operated in light of the except as otherwise provided by law savings provision in the statute, and codified common law duty to drive with due regard for the safety of all persons and property. Several years ago, I had a case in St. Louis in the Eastern District of Missouri for exactly this situation. Two elderly people were driving along in their car when a woman who was running because her registration on her vehicle had expired and she didn't have a way to get home if they seized her car, engaged in a police pursuit. The police chased her and she started going faster and faster and faster. She missed a turn, plowed into the vehicle, and she killed one of the people and critically injured another. So lawyers that retained us to represent them on appeal sued, and they were released on official immunity, and we were able to get that reversed. And I thought that was a good decision because I thought it was such a terrible exercise of discretion by the sheriff in that case. You were talking about a minor traffic incident, and all of a sudden now the driver is doing 10 years for manslaughter as a result of the accident. So there are often tragedies on both ends that occur when police do not use good discretion in initiating or continuing a pursuit. They could very easily have waited until that young lady got home, and then they could have gone out and they could have, if they wanted to, they could have seized the car. But as it was, there was no car left to seize, and several people went to the hospital, and a lawsuit happened as a result. So it's never a good idea to run from the cops. I don't want to give anybody the impression that it is. But, because you can probably, if you've got one of these super fast cars, one of these muscle cars, you might be able to outrun the highway patrol, the car behind you. But you can't outrun his radio, because as long as he's got a radio, you're not going to outrun him. So back to this case. So I think it's pretty clear here that the Supreme Court of Connecticut got this one right. They obviously want their police officers to exercise better discretion when starting and continuing pursuits, and particularly when they are passing cars that might not necessarily see them. You can understand how somebody who is at the head of a line might not see a police car pulling out in the passing lane until it was much too late to do anything about it. So I think this, we don't know for sure whether or not they will ultimately be successful in their case against the officer, but at the very least, they at least have a fighting chance now. The thing that I think really seals the deal for me on why this is a good case is because as a kid, whenever I would hear a siren go by, I would immediately get in the best position so I could see the cop car or the ambulance or the fire truck go by. And over the course of my life, I have had the opportunity to ride in a fire truck and an ambulance and a police car. And I got to tell you, there is a thrill in some respects, particularly in the back of an ambulance, to riding in those vehicles when they're going fast and the sirens are screaming. And as a result, just as it's exciting to a crusty old guy like me, it is also terribly exciting to an 11-year-old boy who's in his front yard when the police are coming by. But the problem isn't the police. The police are very unlikely to run off into the yard and hurt him. It's the knucklehead they're chasing. So sometimes I think when these people pull off into a residential area and start going through the rabbit warren the way they do, it would be a sound idea to simply bring in more patrol cars, block off the entrances and exits, and wait for the guy to come out so you could continue the chase. And if they get away, they get away. Sometimes that's the best outcome. The reason it's the best outcome is not because the bad person gets away doing something that bad people routinely do. Rather, it's because in doing that, they didn't take the life of some child or some older person who isn't watching particularly what they're doing. Maybe somebody who's out there jogging with headphones on. All of those things can create a situation where you wouldn't hear an emergency vehicle, and you also might not see one of these performance cars racing down the road, and if it hits you, there would probably not be any coming back from that. So that's what I have for you today. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. Like, share, subscribe, and if you have the opportunity today, go out and do something nice for somebody. Make the world a better place. You and me, one day at a time, one nice act at a time, we'll change the world. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Come catch me at the beach next time. If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.